by Riverside.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Leadership Bites. Today, I am thrilled to welcome a very special guest, my friend and former colleague, Jess O'Connell. I met Jess years ago when she was my leader serving as the executive director of Emily's List, which is the largest political organization for women in the U.S. And I'm so excited to have Jess on today because regardless of your politics, there's no denying that Jess is a powerhouse as a woman leader. She led efforts to help elect the most diverse Congress in history during her time with Emily's List, quadrupling the number of women of color elected to the Senate and also helping to elect 8 new women to the House, and most of them were women of color. She also oversaw state and local programs to elect more than 250 women, and she helped launch a program called Run to Win, which was a national campaign that recruited over 40,000, yes, you heard that right, 40,000 women to run for office. And for nearly 20 years, Jess has worked to advance progressive people and politics all over the country. She's held senior positions with the Center for American Progress, the Democratic National Committee, Emily's List, the U.S. Global Coalition, Children's Defense Fund, Hillary Clinton, Pete Buttigieg, and she's now the co-founder and CEO at Newco Strategies, which is a majority women and majority LGBTQ owned firm. So we are so excited to have her. Thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedule to join us today, Jess.
Oh, thanks for having me, Cam. I listening to that introduction, I promise I can keep a job. I know I've had quite a few of them, but it's all been wonderful and good, and love to be a part of all those organizations.
Yes, absolutely. And you've made a great difference in everyone. And one of the reasons that I'm really excited to talk with you today, besides our personal history and me really having a personal experience with your leadership and knowing just what a tremendous woman leader you are, you have had a very diverse background. You've led these high profile political campaigns, you've led think tanks, worked, extensively with a lot of different organizations, and you're now leading your own consulting firm. So I'm always curious when people have such a diverse and deep, really, professional background like yours, how did your journey begin as a leader? Was it ever a conscious decision that you wanted to advance to leadership in these spaces?
Whoa, such a good question. The short answer working backwards is no. I definitely don't think I consciously saw myself as a leader in any kind of way. I always was sort of part of teams that were doing things, whether it was, athletics or other kinds of things, and, wasn't necessarily the leader on those things. I think that transition started for me when I entered the workforce. It wasn't really a part of my university experience or my high school experience or, even my upbringing per se. I think I was sort of one of the crowd, but I think when I got into the workplace, some of the sort of natural elements of kind of how I perceive the world and how I operate in the world became strengths.
Yeah.
And in a way that was different maybe than when I was younger. And, it's as far as getting my start, I mean, I do think it's kind of how I was raised and where I grew up. And you only know what you know. And then you start to realize as you get out as an adult in the world that your experiences, your lived experiences are different than others. And it creates a different level of understanding or awareness or resilience or stick-to-itiveness or whatever it is that sometimes can start to create a different pacing, as you're out there. And that's where I think it started for me a little bit. Once I entered kind of the workplace, I started having a better sense of my colleagues and an understanding of things in a way that some of my peers didn't. And that's where I started to end up in different positions and learn more things about how to do the work.
Yeah. So it wasn't a conscious decision that you were going to focus on. Like you never said, you flipped a switch in your head and said, "Oh, I'm going to be a leader," so, but
Definitely not. And honestly, it's even more than that, Kim. It's like, I think it took me a couple decades to even consider myself as a leader.
wow. Yeah.
Both because I had to, because I was in a leadership position, but also more authentically for myself. I can sit here today and own that much more comfortably than I could have even when we worked together, or even, and certainly before that. And I don't know if that's, gendered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe we
Mm-hmm.
take a long time as women to own our leadership abilities and to take credit for that, and to not shrink from that.
Yeah.
Sometimes that might take women longer. I work with a lot of women leaders now, and I find that they struggle with some of the same things I struggled with 10, 20 years ago as a leader, that, women and men are treated different in leadership and how they're perceived and all of that. So maybe it just takes us a little longer to come into that.
Yeah.
I think the generations coming up now struggle with that maybe a little bit less. I think they can step into, they see more women leaders, they see more people who look like them, who come from their lived experiences, their backgrounds, and that's helpful. I think, a lot of the places we were entering into, there might have been a woman there, or we were blazing trails, and that is a different experience, I think.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. So once you started down this leadership pathway and you saw yourself starting to be promoted and get these opportunities, did you focus on any specific courses or trainings that helped you advance a bit?
I definitely did, because I ended up being put in kind of some of these manager and high level director roles where I had budgets and people, and I had no formal training in that. It's not something I went to school for. It's not something my parents had done.
Yeah,
So it was pretty foreign to me, and I was working off instinct,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Just trying to trust my gut, which
yeah.
was working, but I felt like it was insufficient. So I actually did. I ended up the very first job I feel like was really leadership, in particularly in the advocacy space, was I became the director of the Colorado AIDS Project many, many, many years ago, and I was the first woman to ever do it in the whole Rocky Mountain region. So that was a whole thing, and I've had a couple of firsts along
Yeah.
the way, and so I felt a lot of pressure being the first and being a woman, and in an LGBTQ space that was dominated at the time predominantly by white men.
Hmm.
And and so I felt like I needed a little more backup. And so I did go and while I was working, I went and got an MBA. Um,
Okay.
and I think it helped me on the like really tactical stuff, like budgets and the language of business.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it helped me as much on the soft skills side, the people side. I think I already was on the right track along those fronts. I don't think
Yeah.
the MBA to learn how to be like a good, a good person. But I do think it helped me understand, there are business elements, whether it's nonprofit work or political work and campaigns or any of those things. These are small businesses, and some
Yeah.
they're very large businesses that come up and come down. And so it gave me a little boost of confidence to do that, but I do not think it's necessary.
Yeah. Ooh, that's good. That's really, it's interesting you say that. I'm excited to hear that. In my day job, I work with the American Society of Association Executives, and I am Senior Director of Career and Workforce Solutions. And part of what I'm working on right now is launching a new program that focuses on what we're calling essential skills, which are those soft skills for leaders. So that really, we did not plan this, listeners. I promise we did not, but but it is great.
Get right to it.
Yes, but it is great support for everything that we've been saying about the fact that, you can be really technically good at a job, but if you don't master those essential skills, those soft skills around leadership, time management, collaborating, things like that, it can really hinder you on your leadership journey. So thank you for that. So now I'm going to stay with that a little bit and ask you, what are some of the things that you wish you had known before you stepped into leadership roles?
I think, I think that the thing that I feel like I wish I had understood was that there's always going to be tomorrow. There's so much, I think, especially when whether you're blazing a trail or creating your own kind of journey, you can put a lot of pressure on yourself and, to know things. We saw this a lot at Emily's List with candidates. We would try to convince women to run for office and they would feel like they had to know the answer to every single thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, let me tell you something, the men don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not only do they not know the answer to all of these questions, they're not even asking about it. Right. So I think as women in particular, what I've really seen both in my political career and in working with women executives is there's a tendency to feel like you need to know the answer to everything.
Yeah.
And that this moment is the most important moment you might ever face. Both those things we should probably be a little gentler with ourselves on. I think like it's okay to sort of say, that's interesting. I want to think about that, or I want to do a little more research on that, and to give yourself some time and space. I think we've all worked with those managers and leaders that, have an answer for everything. And it can feel comforting sometimes when people do that, but I'd rather they have the right answer. And if that takes them overnight to think about it, or it takes them some time, that's okay.
Yeah.
So I think, permitting ourselves to slow down. We're in such a fast pace, the news changes every 30 seconds, how we communicate with each other, platforms, all these different things are changing. So I think what I wish I knew is like, it is okay to slow down. It's okay to, take your time to arrive at the right answer, or to get help seeking the right answer. And that, there's always going to be the next opportunity. So, you don't have to put all, there will be a tomorrow and a new opportunity no matter what with everything. And if you know that, it just gives you some like safety net a little bit, right? So you don't have to feel like you're on a tight wire that you might fall from, which I think a lot of leaders feel, they're balancing and they're going to fall, and, probably it's going to be okay.
Yeah, I love that. And it's interesting. I was talking with someone recently about the pressure as a leader that you often feel, not you personally, but I mean leaders in the collective, feel to be the first to break new ground or to come up with new things or whatever. How did you manage that as a leader of all these different organizations? And to your point, there are so many opportunities that come your way. What was your process for source what might generally be a SAP on resource? I think that's something that a lot of leaders struggle with, and it's very rarely talked about. But I think you are a seasoned leader that people could really benefit from hearing about that from.
Well, I would say this is the thing I maybe would categorize as having learned the most about over my time. I think when I look back on different jobs that I've held or leadership positions I've held, I thought, I wish I had known some of these things that I know today. Then I would have been a little bit better. Yeah. But I think that impact should really drive decisions and priorities. And sometimes we get so caught up in the day-to-day, or maybe the personnel and the politics of what's happening. And again, we have so much information overload coming at us that it can be really hard to pull ourselves out of that. And really kind of interrogate ourselves a little bit more frequently about, we're doing this for the purpose of what? And And, what will the impact be? Can we name what we think the impact will be if we're successful, or if we invest in this, or if we put money towards it, or if we hire this person,
Yeah.
what will come from it, right? And I think one of the things that we talk a lot about in our practice at NUCO with leaders is questions are really important for managers, right? When someone's, not performing the way that you want them to, or a program didn't work as well, really getting underneath why. There's reasons why something could be happening. And sometimes we just assume we know. We think there's resistance to what we're doing, or, whatever it might be, someone, but really, like, actually understanding. I think one of the most important questions a leader can ask is, well, why do you think that happened? Why do you think you feel that way? Why do you think this? Because you have to gather information, and so in terms of, like, job opportunities, or, when you're in a leadership role, how do you set priorities and make strategic decisions? I think impact should really be one of the, like, drivers of the answer for that.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you. That's such a rich answer. Like that, I think, could be a conversation in and of itself, honestly, and those are the things I was chatting with a friend about that recently, because again, a lot of my network works in nonprofits, right? So whether it's associations or, charitable organizations, political organizations, whatever, we're all sort of in this space. Not everybody, because I know somebody's going to say, well, what about me? Not everybody, but a lot, right? And we all sort of have those same challenges, around, resource allocation and figuring out, sort of what is it that we can, like, how can we strengthen ourselves as leaders and make the best decisions? And sometimes, there are lots of resources and programs and things like that, but there's nothing like sitting down and really talking to someone who has walked in those shoes about how they navigated the space, which is one of the reasons that this podcast, I think, is so rich for me and such a rewarding experience, is because it gives me an opportunity to do that with people like you, Jess, and really learn. And I hope that my listeners are getting that same experience. Now, moving on a little bit, I want to talk about something that you and I were talking about a little bit before the call started, about your passion for diversity, equity, inclusion work. You've always seemed to, since I've known you, you've always seemed to have that, like, really great passion for that work. And I'd love to know more about what drove your passion for this work and what fuels it today. What keeps you going?
Yeah. Well, as you know my story. I mean, I think we are products of where we come from and how we are raised and our lived experiences, and that helps inform, our lives as we start out. My story begins in Arizona. I was raised in Arizona. I was adopted by my aunt, was raised by a white woman and an African-American father. They both adopted me and raised me. And he was from Mobile, Alabama, and lived there at a time before the civil rights movement had really hit. In fact, he escaped, sort of ran from Mobile because of the racism and the dangers that were there for him and his cousins, and joined the Air Force.
Yeah.
And he, that's how he ended up in Arizona. Eventually he landed at Luke Air Force Base and kind of just retired out of there and stayed in Arizona. He liked the warm weather. And, I think when you come up in a diverse family, and at that time, especially, thankfully we see a lot more images and TV shows and culture around diverse families. But when I was coming up, you didn't see a lot of that. A lot of gay families. There weren't a lot of mixed race families. I mean, they existed, but we didn't, right? Of course they were there.
Right.
Everywhere. But it wasn't, I didn't know anyone else, who was coming up in that experience. And it was a thing that, you don't understand when you're younger, but when you get older, you realize, I was just steeped in a lot of experiences around racism and injustice in ways that were just part of my everyday life that I didn't understand. I mean, I don't share this often, but I had more than one occasion um, as a child when I would be with him when, white folks would come up to me, they thought he was kidnapping me.
Oh
Right?
gosh.
And they
Yeah.
would say, do you need help? I didn't
Yeah.
even understand the question,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
until I was a grown woman that I understood those people were racists.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a child. I didn't, I just said say no, but I realized when I got older what that was. And so I was surrounded by a lot of that. And also when you're white, people think or act a certain way. And it's like, they don't know you. It's not something you wear. They can read. It's a little bit, I'm LGBTQ and like, you might know it because I tell you, you don't necessarily know it. Right. And so it's the same,
Yeah.
and so anyway, I think that, certainly think that shaped it. We weren't overly political.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a thing that we did. The only political thing we ever did in my family overtly that I remember was Arizona was the last state to honor and acknowledge Martin Luther King Jr. federal holiday. They
Yeah.
held out. They didn't want to do it. My parents refused to let me go to school on that day, that holiday. Even
Wow.
Arizona students went to school, and we
Wow.
would go downtown and we marched. And it was my really one of my first experiences with that kind of thing. And that was like the only thing we really did, And so I think as I got older and, started to enter into the world and the workforce and all those things, I realized my experience was slightly different and my
Mhm.
vantage point had been a little bit different. I understood more of my Black friends' perspectives. And when I got to work, I understood more of my, Black and Latino and Latina and, Asian friends' perspectives because I had not experienced the things they do, but
Yeah.
I've seen it, right?
Yeah.
And seen those things. And so I think that was just lived experience. And so how I translated that into work was simply by trying to work in places and authentically, um, you know, encourage and bring as many voices and people into the conversation and into leadership. The thing about Arizona too is, again, in hindsight, it's like all our family friends. I mean, we had friends who married immigrants from Mexico. Most of my
Mhm.
cohort of family friends spoke Spanish. They were bilingual.
Yeah.
I didn't even, until many years later, didn't even occur to me that that was a thing. We look at the challenges now that immigrants face, entering this country and all that. I mean, I know a lot of people in Arizona with that experience. And so, part of it was what I lived and part of it it also became obvious that the workplaces needed to do better.
Yeah.
Right? The level of segregation of people in with status and job levels and pay um, and the ability to influence strategies and reach communities. I mean, it's just at every level we needed to do better. And that wasn't altruistic on my part. That was a part of, again, having impact.
Yeah.
I like to say, I want to be some good person. It's like, of course it would make a difference.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like some conscious like thing. It was like, well, why wouldn't we have these people at the table? Why wouldn't we ask someone who knows way better than us,
Mhm.
how to
Yeah.
reach a community or how to talk to them or what they might be thinking about, and the fact that we weren't doing that was sort of astonishing,
Yeah.
and needed to be resolved and still needs to be resolved, frankly.
Yeah, yeah. And thank you for that. And for sharing. I think it's so powerful. And I'll ask you because diversity, I have a passion for DEIA myself. And I will ask you, as you're a member of the LGBTQ plus community, what do you think is the greatest threat to that community right now? And how can those of us who are allies to your community be supportive or more supportive?
I think the greatest threat to any marginalized communities right now is silence.
Mm,
I think the thing that all of us can do that we are capable of doing today
yeah,
is to check in on our friends and colleagues who
yeah,
are marginalized in some way or under attack in some way is to speak up,
Yeah.
whether they're in the room or not,
Yeah.
about something that has happened or something that seems, um, you know, unfair or unjust. Um, and I think to keep learning.
Mm.
Just because I'm gay or just because I have diverse friends and family, certainly doesn't mean I know everything there is to know about that experience,
Yeah.
about the history,
Mm.
about solutions. And, I think there are these moments that we've all had that usually center around some type of tragedy that
Mhm.
prompts us to dig in a little more and, check in on people or give a couple of bucks to someone or some group or read a little bit more. But I think maybe we all have to, especially um, in these times we're in where, there are different value sets at play right now in the country. And, I think if we want to preserve and protect and make better the democracy and a multiracial democracy, um, uh, that we all want, there's some work that goes into that. It doesn't
Yeah.
just happen. It's democracy isn't passive.
Yeah.
And so I think there are things we can do big and small, but I think the number one thing is to use our voice and to speak up, because I
Yeah.
think that goes a long way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. Thank you so much. So Jess, I'm gonna ask you about nonprofits and women again.
Let's do it.
So I've read a report recently called Race to Lead, and it's something that the Building Movement Project put out, a report, and it cites a declining interest in leading nonprofits. And it's really just overall a declining interest, but particularly, I think among women leaders, we are seeing some challenges there. And so, based on your experience leading like these major nonprofit organizations, how do you think current leaders can be more supportive of emerging leaders and help like regenerate that interest in the leadership pipeline?
Yeah, I haven't read that report, but I'm so not surprised to hear that. The burnout is so high for people. It's always been high in nonprofits, actually. I think it's
Yeah.
always been hard for women. I think even as women have ascended to executive director and president roles of organizations, oftentimes the boards are still led by straight white men and, they're
Mhm.
still sort of getting it.
Yeah.
And also, I think, in all honesty, and I say this as not a leader of an organization today, I think the challenges our leaders are facing are as complex as ever.
Mhm.
I think the generational challenges, um, the sort of economic and social challenges we're facing as a country, there's no way that doesn't bleed into our work. The work itself has always been challenging, capturing people's attention and interest towards issues. So there's a million reasons why the stress and burnout and exhaustion is so high. Of course, our leaders are like everyone else. They have families. They're trying to
Yeah.
stay healthy. They're trying to, all those things. So I think there are we work on this stuff a little bit at NUCO too. I think the two big themes that I think three actually three big things I think are important right now. One is really centering resilience and
Mhm.
wellness and
Mhm.
creating some space. It's sort of like was never okay to you sort of had to be a martyr about the work and
Yes.
4/7 and
Yeah.
we all know like that, it's like first in, last out and,
Yeah.
all of that stuff. And, of course there are leaders who will do that. But what we see is that burnout and that exhaustion just hits that much harder. And especially when there's a crisis, and there are a lot of them these days. So I think fostering a sense and in making some investment in how do we stay resilient, even beyond like, you know, it's not just like, hey, go work out. People don't have time to go work out. It's like it's like soulful resilience. It's
Yeah.
when I say resilience, it's like joy. Is there any joy in your work and in your day? how do we bring that in? At NUCO, we have a value that says music matters. And
Yeah.
it's to remind us, like, we put music on before our meetings. And when we're with our clients,
I love
we
it.
have some tunes on, because it's like, set the tone, set the mood. Like, no matter what's happening, like, we can control what we can control. So,
Yeah.
I think resilience is number one. I think feeling safe is number two. I think, leaders face threats that are different than they used
Mhm.
to. And see, in all honesty, the facts are there, the numbers are there, the spikes in threats and political violence and racial violence and all these things that are happening have grown exponentially. That puts a lot of pressure on people and their families. A lot of us still work from home.
Mhm.
You used to have some separation from your home and your work that could, divide some of those feelings of safety and things like that. But now if you work from home, it's like those things come closer. It feels a little more stressful.
Mhm.
I think that, that those things are just really important to building kind of, the future. And the last thing I would just say is like belonging. You mentioned I was on the Pete campaign. I thought he was such a master communicator, and I thought he did a good job of using the word belonging and helping people understand, a new sort of group of people. A lot of people have used that word in the past, but helping kind of the next generation of leaders understand how important belonging can be, and
Yeah.
creating whatever that community is. I'm an introvert.
Mhm.
I'm talking to you, but I'm an introvert,
Yeah.
and but we all need to find some space that feels like we're connecting with people, especially when we're working from home. And so belonging and resilience and feeling safe, I think, are things that we need to work on so that we can keep doing the work.
Yeah. 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 Terrific insights. Terrific insights. So, what advice would you give 25-year-old Jess about about being a woman in leadership and having staying power?
Hmm. Well, keep going. I mean,
Yeah.
that sounds simple, but I will tell you, the entrepreneurs that I
Yeah.
have learned from, which by the
Yeah.
way has been, as I was coming up, was predominantly men. Now I have, because of you and this podcast and so many other people that have uplifted women,
Yeah.
now I can have women to learn from and watch, which is a game changer.
Yeah. Thank
But
you.
I will say I learned early on from being a part of um, kind of entrepreneurial endeavors, both in the political and business world, that the one thing I noticed is that, man, they kept going.
Mm.
Like, they hit bumps, um, and maybe they had doubts, but they kind of didn't show it. And, there was like a level of watching these leaders um, just keep showing up.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I have a mantra for myself, but now that I'm a small business owner myself, the last 5 years, um, one of the things I do tell myself is like, just keep going,
Yeah.
because you will turn the page, you will reach another chapter, and it will, whatever it is that's bothering you today, it's very unlikely going to be the same problem in 90 days. So
Yeah.
keep going. Keep,
Yeah. I love that. So, what's your journey been like transitioning to? I mean, and you've been at Nuco for a while. Like Nuco's not. It's not like 1 year old, So it's been a while now. But what has been your journey in terms of moving from these career and the career focused on political leadership, nonprofit leadership, and now to your own firm? What's that journey been like? Have you, is it more challenging than you anticipated or about what you anticipated? Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely been more challenging, but it's also been more rewarding. Uh,
Mm,
we started Nuco about a year and a half, maybe a year to a year and a half before the pandemic hit,
okay.
and I think there was no business plan,
Yeah.
there was no surveying the market.
Yeah.
It was the kind of thing where, for my own resilience and sustainability, we just had a child. I needed some flexibility. I wanted some flex. I actually wanted to be an active part of
Hmm.
being with my son while we had, while we had that time together before school. And so I wanted more autonomy and flexibility, and, you know, hung that shingle out and wasn't really sure what would happen,
Right.
and it's been, it's been, extremely rewarding in the sense that we've had a successful 5 years. They've been different, really different chapters, and in some cases, multiple chapters in a year.
Yeah.
um, it's a lot of, there is I joke that, running a business, particularly a professional services consulting business, it's like being in school and having finals like every week. Like you can finish 15 things and feel like, yes, I did it. And then you still have like two more things to go and they don't know about your other 15 things. So you have to be someone who is comfortable with discomfort,
Yeah.
comfortable with ambiguity, because I don't know what the next thing looks like 60, 90, 100 days later. Um, you have to have some confidence in yourself and in the people who you're surrounding yourself with, that you'll figure it out together. One of
Yeah.
the other things we talk about at Nuco in terms of our own values is like, we all do the work. We can, and we can figure it out. Like,
Hmm.
we say yes to things we don't know the answer to,
Hmm.
knowing that we can figure it out. And that's not a comfortable place for everyone. But I
Yeah.
think, to really be an entrepreneur, the vision is important, but it's the keep showing up and keep figuring it out, and keep doing really good work. But it's not easy. I mean, when the pandemic hit, we had, I'd say half our business was like, work where we were doing convenings and events and conferences and doing kind of like connecting people around things. That all went away,
Yeah.
obviously. And
Yeah.
well, what are we going to do now?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I'd ever used Zoom, right? We all had to figure out how to use Zoom. We had to figure out how to facilitate engaging meetings online and bring people back. And, so there was a moment there around things. We had a rough patch where, you know, people weren't, we're small business. It wasn't quite the right fit. It's like, how do you facilitate that?
Yeah.
How do you bring in, and what even is the right alchemy of the kinds of people you want to bring? So we face the same things that our clients face. We face the same things that your listeners face. But it's really, getting a cohort of people you can trust in and believe in and rely on, and then having the confidence to just keep going, just keep.
Yeah. I love it. I'm gonna hang that up over my desk. Just keep going. I love it. I love it. And so, Jess, what is next for Nuco? Is there anything that you'd want to share with our listeners about the important work that you're doing right now? Any upcoming initiatives that you think people should know about?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for that. I think, we spent 5 years sort of helping people who reach out to us, about how to run their organizations and be more efficient and impactful and human and all of the things that we want. And what we've seen are some gaps in some spaces that we want to help develop tools and techniques and help around. And they're kind of in, three areas. We sort of touched on them. One we launched actually this month, which is called the Democracy Security Project. And that's meant for organizations and leaders who want a little help, with awareness and training and how to ensure that your teams feel safe, whether it's online through cybersecurity, whether it's physical, working in pairs, if you're doing outside organizing or things like that. And also, in the event that you're facing some sort of crisis, we want to be helpful. So creating a one-stop shop. And we just launched a website, democracysecurityproject.org. So that's a place you can go to get help if you need it. And then we have two others that are going to be coming. One is around this issue of resilience and wellness,
Yeah.
creating some workshops and some support for teams. We know we need it, but like, how do we talk about it? How do we add some value there for our team? So if people are looking for workshops or programming around any of that, we're going to try to provide some of that. We've been piloting those programs and they've gone very well. And then the last is always leadership, right?
Yeah.
We're going to launch a leadership project around things that we see are we're asked about the most: decision making, being strategic and impactful, how to
Yeah.
better communicate internally.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do when you face resistance from people? How do do you recognize it? What do you do? How do you become a high performing team? You have good people and you want to kind of level it up. All those things we hear about a lot. So we're
Yeah.
going to be rolling that out as well. So we actually have a lot moving.
Yes, you do. I was going to say, now, listen, you are busy over at Newco
Busy.
Strategy.
Trying to help. We're trying to help.
I love it. I love it. So, Jess, who is your target market for Newco? Because, like I said, we have a lot of listeners who I think span the spectrum, right? Like there are some folks who are on the for-profit. So, like sometimes when I'm talking to nonprofit guests, I have to explain our acronyms and things like that. We also have folks that are in other spaces of nonprofits, charitable organizations, political, etc. Also, of course, associations. So who is your target market for Newco Strategies in case they're interested in any of the programs that you mentioned?
We work with all kinds of people. We work with people whose values we share. I want to name that. That's important,
Yeah.
But that spans all industries. So we have definitely worked in the private sector with groups that work with local governments or do digital or tech things. We help them with their teams, sometimes with their programs. We've worked with universities on some of their programs and different kinds of things. We definitely work with nonprofits of all kinds, some that are maybe more politically focused, others that are just advocacy. We worked on a wide range of issues of just regular C3 nonprofits. And of course, a lot of us come out of the political and campaign and electoral space. So that is a part of our work as well. We continue to help try to preserve and protect our democracy and work with people who agree with us on that. And so it's a wide range. And I think we do that on purpose and by design. We are not just a political firm because I think we all have something to learn from each other, and we want to engage in other sectors and we want them to engage with us so that we can all be smarter and sharper and more effective together.
I love that. I love that. And I am going to ask you, this has nothing to do with what I just asked, but I have got to know, because I saw the coverage in the Washington Post and some other news outlets, but you were the organizer, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the main organizer for the COVID-19 Remembrance project. And that was that beautiful memorial that we saw. I believe it was on the grounds of the mall here in DC, where there were chairs that were set up that represented all of the different people that we lost. Well, not all of them, of course, we can measure all of them, but a lot of them that we lost during the pandemic. How did that come to life? Like, how did you bring that to life? Such a beautiful project.
I think it's one of the things I'm most proud of over the last 5 years that we did. We really bootstrapped that idea. And we felt that at the time, there was not enough attention being paid to communities that were being most impacted by COVID. And it was fairly early on in it. And we wanted to draw attention to the number of deaths. We wanted to draw attention to the types of people that were being most impacted. And we wanted to do it visually. We just felt like we wanted to send a message to Congress. We wanted to send a message to the president at the time. And we were trying to come up, a friend of mine, Eileen Toback, I was brainstorming with her and she came up, she sent me a note about something that had been done in Europe with these chairs. And she had this idea, and we'd been toying with what we were going to do. We thought flags, we had all these ideas. And the minute I saw the chairs and I said, that's it, we're going to do the chairs. And people really worked with us. We partnered with a group in New York called COVID Survivors for Change so that we could make sure we had voices that were in. And we did it was still in the middle of COVID. So we actually didn't want to invite anybody.
Right.
What we did was we set up the chairs, which was the imagery was the most beautiful thing I've seen. It went around the world. It was around the world, that imagery. It was on Senator Hirono from Hawaii had a Senate floor. We were so proud of it. But we did we did like a live theater, show on a stage, but we didn't invite him. We said, well, so watch it online. And we had
Yeah.
singers from New York, and Miss Dionne Warwick came and
Yeah.
emceed it for us. She's always done a lot with health. A lot of people don't know that she was a healthcare ambassador. I believe it was under President Reagan. And so she said yes, and she got herself on the Amtrak and came down. I said, let us get you. And she said, no, I'll take the train. I mean, she got herself down, and she emceed that event for us. And I think it really was meaningful, and I was really proud of it. And it's keep going, right? We asked a couple people if they put in a little bit of money to kind of pay to get it all set up and do it. And people said yes. And it created, I think, a moment, and one that has been emulated since. And actually the COVID Survivors for Change, they took it to other cities, and they did chairs in the cities, and it became a thing they've done kind of across the country. And so really proud of that project.
Yeah, you should be. I mean, I remember during the pandemic seeing the photos of it in the Washington Post, and it was just stunning. And you're right about the visual. It really drove home the impact of what we were dealing with at the time. And it was just, because you think about it now, and I think it's something that's so important, and it will be important for future generations. Because I was chatting with a friend recently about the pandemic, and I said to her, doesn't it seem like a dream? Like, it almost feels it feels weirdly like we all woke up. Remember, I was a little kid, like, watching this show. I don't know if you ever watched the show Dallas, right? Like, with Larry Hagman.
I was a little kid too.
Yes. So
I was a little kid too.
Yeah.
Where's JR?
So, like, I remember my mom being really, really into that show, and not really fully understanding everything that was going on. But I do remember, like, what reminds me of this episode is she gasped so loudly when, like, it was like, I think Bobby woke up from a dream, and everything had been a dream. Yes, it was all a dream. And so the whole last season of the show or something wound up being a dream. And that's kind of how it feels when you think about the pandemic. Obviously, for those that suffered, losses, of parents, siblings, friends, and I lost some people that I knew and cared about as well. So I don't mean to minimize that in any way, but I do, it just feels so surreal now. And so I think the imagery of things like what you all did in that memorial will be important for future generations to be able to see in a more direct way that impact. So thank you for doing that.
I appreciate that. I think I think we're still in it.
So
I haven't been able to close the door on it yet and process it. There'll come a time. I don't even want to watch anything on TV about it. So don't put it in a show or anything. Like, I think we're still getting through it. And so it makes sense. But thank you. We really were proud of it. And it was a group effort with our team and with COVID Survivors for Change. And they did a wonderful, beautiful job, and the work that they continue to do with survivors, and especially the children who lost parents. They've done some really good work with those children, so they can be set up for the future and have what they need. So anyway,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jess. This has been a pleasure. I have been wanting to get you on this podcast since we started it. You were sort of on my dream list of people to interview. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us and to share about your leadership journey, what you have happening now, and sort of what the future of your organization is. And how can folks get in contact with you if they want to get to know you, if they want to follow along with what you're doing?
Yeah, the easiest way is nucostrategies.com. NUWCO, nucostrategies.com. I'm there. My email's there. If you Google me, you can find me on LinkedIn too. So, although I'm not on there every day, but I'll find you eventually.
Yes. So. I love it.
We're all juggling.
Yes, we are. Thank you so much, Jess. You have a great day.
Thanks, Cam. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.